Welcome to Go-to-Market Science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. Now let's get into it. All right, welcome to another episode. Today, we're talking about setting the foundation for AI in go-to-market, how Time Doctor grew ACV by 30% and reduced sales cycles in 6 months by redesigning their fundamental go-to-market processes and then layering on AI agents. My special guest today is Duane Dufault, CRO at Time Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. It's going to be a fun conversation, cover some topics that I don't feel like get talked about enough out in the interweb of the world, because some of it's not sexy to do, but it's necessary.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is how you grew ACV by 30%, how you cut sales cycles by 30 to 40 days down from, originally 90 days, which is a massive accomplishment. And this is not just about AI. You did a lot of fundamental things that had an impact directly on revenue before we even get to AI. But then if we have time, I want to talk about how you're using AI agents today. And most importantly, like how you rebuilt the foundation to support it all. You had a complex trial registration process that we're going to get into, connecting through 3 different systems to the CRM. As a result, you're missing half your necessary data to route leads and do attribution. CRM was massively overbuilt. So you rebuilt the trial process. You cleaned up the lead flow. You cleaned up 90% of the issues associated with attribution, prioritized the right leads, and applied AI for outreach. There's a lot there. I'm excited to dive into it. So I'll start by asking you, can you summarize the story for me? How do we go from trial registration to CRM cleanup to AI to 30%, higher ACV? When you first shared this with me, I'm like, trial registration, really? Okay, we're really deep in the weeds here. But as you explained it to me, there's a lot behind it. So maybe you could summarize this for the audience.
Yeah, one of the things that I do, or I try to focus on, is I really try to find. I pulled it from Tim Ferriss's book a long time ago, The 4-Hour Workweek, which was, what is the biggest domino you can knock down to get to minimum viable progress, right? Not minimum viable product, but what's the first and most important thing you can get towards progress? And so here, what I did is just follow the bouncing ball backwards of like, where is the most important thing that's hindering our ability to get to leads, right? Because a lot of people argue like, oh, trials, they don't convert, or it's at freemium, or it's whatever. It's like, well, you gotta pull back and look at what is the number one source of leads that you have coming in right now, and how do you optimize for that first, and then you add other things. And so that's how we got to the trial registration page. It's the number one submitted form on our site at the time, I think still is today, and there are a lot of problems connected to that. So it's like, go solve the biggest, most important problem in the business first. That way, everything else after that becomes a lot easier to optimize.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'm a big believer in this domino effect and setting the foundation. You and I were talking offline about how it seems like every post on LinkedIn these days is, hey, I released this AI agent and we booked 75,000 meetings, each week. And you're like, really? Okay, cool. Did that actually drive revenue? And, there's this massive FOMO we're all feeling right now that we all need to adopt AI tomorrow in every area of go-to-market and every area of the business. And I'm all for that. But it's not going to work if you don't set the right foundation. And so what you're talking about is this very granular issue that had really serious impact on your entire go-to-market and resulted in an actual impact on your revenue, which is what we're all here to talk about.
Yeah. And the AI thing is interesting because every time I see those posts, I'm like, oh, you must be a brand new business no one knows about. And you have no data to operate on so that you don't have to worry about poor data, because AI is only as good as a data layer that it feeds it. Notice all those posts are all about booked meetings, not completed meetings or opportunities created. But the challenge with that is you have to start every modern tech company, whether implementing AI or not, the number one source of information and where the leverage is sitting in your data, whether that's CRM data or product use data. Hopefully you can merge those two and really get moving on that stuff. But you have to start where the data is coming in, and then that's where you're going to optimize. And if the data coming in is not accurate, it's not clean, and it's not simple, then it's going to be very, very hard to do anything with, let alone apply an agent on top of that. Because if you apply an agent on top of poor data, that's when you get the excuses from other people like, oh, AI doesn't work. It's like, well, you got to unpack it first, because what are you feeding it? You have to start there. So with the trial, that was a number one source of poor data coming into the CRM from many different places. And it was very impossible just to run traditional go-to-market reports, sales pipeline reports, attribution reports, sales cycle reports, because everything was getting convoluted.
We see this every day, and I have conversations with CROs every day about issues like this. And inevitably, oftentimes, it's just not the priority to fix. Like you and I were talking offline about how a lot of CROs don't understand, the technology at this level of depth, which is one issue. But, even when I was putting together notes for this call, I'm thinking like, okay, so you go to the trial registration page, you enter some data, it goes through 3 different systems, it gets to the CRM. Why do you as a CRO care? And I think you've partially answered that already because it's impacting revenue. But I guess the question that I have in my mind is how did you identify that like, okay, this is where we need to roll up our sleeves and fix this? Like, what were the things that you saw before the journey that said, man, if we fix this, this could really make an impact?
It starts from this is where it's important for CROs to have sold before. Like if you've never sat in that seat as an account executive trying to figure out what's happening with the leads that you're getting, how do you actually reach out to the right people? And so it came from really interviewing all the sales reps, all the SBRs, even the CSMs to figure out like, what does their day-to-day look like and what do they handle? Walk me through how they currently use the CRM. And it just always came back to that same thing of, the stuff that's in front of them isn't correct. It's all over the place. It comes in randomly. And even back then, when I first got at the company, they had kind of 2 teams that were in charge of quote unquote fixing the data before I ever got to an account executive. And I mentioned it in some of my notes. So back then it was like the speed to lead for an account executive was 10 days after form submit. And like that baffles me because it should be within a few hours. And so one of a really big red flags for me was they had an outsourced BDR team that was doing manual data enrichment on an inbound form. And then they would hand that off to an SDR who would then do outbound calls to that inbound form and then hand it off to an account executive. And I remember asking the question, like, why is this process in place? And it was, to fix the data. I'm like, well, why don't you just fix the data at the source and then remove that and you can have your speed to lead go from 10 days to a day. And that was one of the first things that we really did was reconfigure that. And then it went straight to the account executives. So the speed to lead was cut and basically reduced by 10x at that point. And that was one of the leading indicators or leading causes for an increase of ACV because you can get to the lead as soon as possible. So it's just following the bouncing ball after sitting in the day in the life of what the seller did.
I think it's a really great way to look at it. And if you look at it sort of the opposite way you explain it and just say, okay, like our speed to lead is 10 days because it's a massive problem. It's not a great leap of faith to think like if we reduce that from 10 days to 2 hours, we're going to see higher conversions. I mean, we all know that typically the first vendor to respond to a lead wins that deal. And, many argue that we should be responding in 5 minutes, at least with a hot like hand raiser lead, which I would think a trial registration would qualify for. If not a couple hours, but like 10 days, like at that point in time, they've already had multiple meetings with your competitors.
Yeah. And that's the mentality I've always had is anytime, because that's how we buy, it's how I buy. If I'm submitting a form for a demo or a trial, I'm doing it with 2 other companies at the same time. And so it's like at that time, the business was still kind of like in that transactional mode where they're like, oh, we're just going to only sell to low hanging fruit. If you don't want it right now, see you later. Right. Because there's a lot of sales skill set stuff that we've implemented and kind of revamped in the last couple of years. But the number one priority was, are the account executives getting the right leads at the right time? And going all the way back to the trial registration page, it was like, well, if that's the number one lead source at the time, well, let's make sure that's dialed in so it gets the account executives properly and they've got the visibility to go and reach out to that prospect.
That's another really great component. I mean, one of the things that like we talk about a lot in our content and I talk about with CROs when I'm on calls with them is like, how do we pick the one thing that matters the most? I mean, you mentioned like the biggest domino, right? And so a lot of times I'll say, okay, like if you could fix one thing in the next 90 days, would it be new business or net revenue retention? Okay, let's say we pick new business. Let's drill down a layer deeper. Would it be closing the deals that you're generating right now or generating more new deals? Okay, like let's go another layer deeper. Is it inbound or outbound? And then you keep drilling down and down and down. And in your case, you're saying, well, this is like our number one lead source, if I heard you correctly. So it makes sense to say, okay, our number one lead source has a 10-day sales cycle, or let's just say, let's back that up. Our number one lead source, we want to improve it. Okay, what are the issues here? Well, we have a 10-day lead response time. Like, okay, that's an obvious thing to fix. I'd love to hear a little bit more though about the other things that you fixed in this flow. So you mentioned like not having the right data to even route the lead. You mentioned attribution issues. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'll start with attribution. because it's near and dear to my heart. Because if you're inbound led organization, you're all, AKA you're a marketing led organization, right? And if the attribution isn't correct or right, because at the time, I think like 80% of our form submits showed direct, but when you dug into the actual analytics, they weren't. It was just getting reset through the different transformations the data was going through. So when we fixed that, then we actually fed the right data back into our marketing team so they can optimize their campaigns properly to send more of the best business. So, and before then, though, it was almost like I had a conversation with the founder back then, and he was like, what if we just shut off marketing? And I was like, well, hold on. Like, let's actually make sure we're looking at the right data because it wasn't correct. Like I said, 70 to 80% of the attribution was showing direct, and we all know what that means, but it was just very inaccurate decision making when it came to where we put our dollars inside of our marketing campaigns. So, if sales leaders aren't concerned about attribution, then they're not providing the right feedback into marketing to get them more leads. So the key thing was making sure that the number one source of our leads, which at the time was our paid media campaigns, we were getting the right data back into them so they can optimize them to send us better leads more often. And the other one was, what was your other question?
We talked about attribution and also lead routing.
Oh, lead routing. Yeah, sorry. So lead routing, you want to send, like I said in the beginning, you want to send the right leads to the right reps. So we have SMB, mid-market, and up-market account executives. And you want to make sure the right leads go to the right reps, because if you send an SMB lead to an up-market rep, it's going to be worked completely different. The time frames, their sales process, their outreach, how they manage, either call it a POC or a trial, however you want to look at it, it's going to be different. They're going to sell differently. And so we were having issues with lead routing and assignment to the account executives. People were getting leads that were SMB North America who are upmarket rep in APAC. And so it was just constant switching back and forth. Reps were having to, either wake up at 1:00 in the morning to do a demo, or they're having to hand leads back and forth, which then they weren't doing it right in the CRM. So it was screwing everything up. So the lead routing is actually one of the things, even today, I have my hands in on a weekly basis, making sure that stuff's being done right, because speed to lead and going to the right rep is extremely important. But yeah, attribution and lead routing were some of the key things that were not working correctly. And those are one of the two things that when we fixed that area of the trial registration page made a dramatic improvement. Because again, like if you've got leads coming in Eastern Europe, you want to make sure it's going to the reps in that region. So that way they can do the lead, they can follow up, they can do the sales process at a timely hour for the prospect, not just having a rep in California try to work a deal that's in the Philippines. Like that's just not going to work for the prospect.
Yeah. And I mean, these are the fundamental things that I think just burns so much, capital, time, people, etc. I mean, every sales job I've ever had, I felt like I was dealing with issues like this. And then I walked into Salesforce one day and just like all these issues were gone. And it was just like mind blowing to me. And it was like, okay, they had like dialed all this stuff in. And I don't mean to say the Salesforce was perfect. And there's tons of stuff that like I hated, and don't even get me started on their whole CPQ implementation, which was with not the same company that they acquired like a month later. They're not perfect, but like for the most part, like all this stuff was just dealt with and I could just sell. And in previous jobs, I just had to deal with all these issues. And I think it's such a powerful thing. And if I go back to sort of like this prioritization where we drill down into your go-to-market and say, okay, like the thing we want to fix are these inbound leads. And specifically what we want to fix are these leads that are going to trial. You then fix your attribution, and you're able to say, okay, like these are actually coming from our ad campaigns. So now we know where to double down on ads. You also look at this and say, okay, we fixed the data layer. Now we know how to route these leads to the right rep, which should improve our conversion rates and our average deal sizes and our sales cycles and all of these things, right? So we're fixing these fundamentals, and we'll get into AI, but whatever it is you are doing or will do with AI, you have to have this stuff in place first, because if you just send these leads over, you send the SMB APAC lead over and you've got like an AI workflow for enterprise US, or it just doesn't have the data to discern the two things, like you're just going to get like a really terrible result.
Yeah. It's going all the way down to, are we collecting the right information from the lead when it comes in, all the way down to, is it the proper company name for that personalization token? Like little things like that make a difference. And I get the question often like, hey, what's the one lever that you can pull? I'm like, it's not one lever. I heard this phrase, it's not a golden It's not a silver bullet. It's it's a bunch of golden BBs, right? And it's like all these little things that you do over time that stack up, that add up to that number. And oftentimes as a CRO, when you're in the middle of these things, it's really hard to look back and say like, oh, we did all of these things that led up to today. And there's not one that you can point to. They're like, oh, that was the big thing. That was the big thing. It's just like you stack these micro adjustments over time that end up leading to an improved process. And you look back on the year, and I go through an exercise where it's like, I look at all the things that were changed. And sometimes that list is really long, but it's like, we couldn't have got to where we're at without doing all of those. And you have to, as a CRO, it's like the number one perspective, the lens that I use is what makes it easy for a sales rep to sell? And how can I remove as many obstacles? And I take that same lens and apply it to our product-led, our PLG flows. Because whatever the sales rep is experiencing is amplified in the product for a customer journey. So thinking about all these little micro changes, these golden BBs that we're shooting, they all have to stack up to how much revenue are we bringing in, how much revenue are we keeping, and how much is it costing us to do that.
I completely agree with that perspective. And at the same time, like if you ask me like, what's the silver bullet? I want to go with like account identification or some flavor of that. And so I actually wanted to ask you, like, is there any aspect of this? Like, are there any times where you'd get a trial registration and you'd say like, we're either not going to call that person, or we're going to have a different workflow to deprioritize it? Or did you call every trial registration? They were all ICP, all qualified, all worth working.
If it was all qualified and all worth working, we'd have a much bigger organization. No, there has to be a level of prioritization. Like you have to, all the way down to the fundamentals. Like if you don't have your ICP, your personas and your use cases and your positioning dialed in, then you don't really know what you're selling to. And so as leads come in, whether it's from a demo form, whether it's from an outbound process, or, you've got some AI SDR enrichment thing, it has to funnel through your ICP. It has to. So if you get leads that come in that you won't close, why would you waste a salesperson's time to call them? Because then they're going to follow through. If a quality salesperson is going to work them through the process. And so how do we reduce that friction and frustration for the sales rep? Well, we want to make sure we send the right leads to the right reps. And so there's definitely an area of prioritization. Like we have them segmented to where we got your VSBs, very small businesses. Those go through the self-serve journey. Like let them go through the product. And if they convert and expand, that's great. We'll pick up the indicators and triggers to help them throughout the way. But it's like, we have to prioritize the right leads based on our ICP personas, use cases. And that's always the filter that we pass it through. Even when we do pipeline reviews with our upmarket reps and we're going through it, it's like, that's the lens that we use. Are they the right fit? Has that type of customer gotten success from us before? Do we have a relationship with the right stakeholders? And are we checking the box, making sure we have the right things from them? And so you constantly have to pass your go-to-market funnel through that filter. And then lo and behold, when you have that filter, the ICP personas dialed in, that's a version of the data layer that can feed an agent that helps with that process to better prepare account executives and helps filtering.
That's great. So let me ask you this, like, let's say that we have an enterprise account. Are there enterprise accounts that are not ICP for you? And if they happen to fill out like a trial registration, what do you do with that?
If they're up market and they're coming to us for a reason, right? There's enough opportunity there, or there's a high enough opportunity there where we can waste a little bit of time diving into it. So if an enterprise customer, does come to our site, fills out a form, they've taken the time to fill out a form and reach out to us, we're going to at least give them a phone call. We're going to go through the initial evaluation phase, maybe give them 1 or 2 calls, and then evaluate if it's necessary to create the deal and move it forward. But we're going to try to disqualify them quickly. Where on the lower end of the market, you should have a process in place to do that. You should have an automation, you have an agent, a qualification agent that can do that without having human intervention. So if you look at it from the old school funnel matrix, right? You've got your problem aware, problem identification, and you start doing the research. When you have the enterprise customer that comes in that's this size, you want to get them as early as possible, but you want to push the smaller ones down that buying funnel as far as you can before you absolutely need a human to intervene.
Quick pause. Everything we talk about on this show, diagnosing go-to-market ops, prioritizing projects for revenue impact, processes, metrics, insights, building a predictable go-to-market engine, we've built frameworks for all of it. They're free and ungated on our website, unionsquareconsulting.com/frameworks. The link will also be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. All right, back to the episode.
I think where I was going with that is just trying to understand, and I have these questions for myself. It's like, okay, you've got like the right industry, the right revenue range, but what other attributes are important to define your ICP? And for us, there's like a lot of nuance with it. For example, it's really hard for us to work with CROs that like don't understand these things like you do. If they're just like, hey, like I want to just implement Salesforce and make more sales calls, we're like, we're going to have a tough uphill battle here. And so those things are important for us. But where I was getting at is, are there companies that, you know, fit your industry and revenue range that are still not ICP? And if so, what do you do with them?
Well, it's a really good question, because if you think 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even a little bit beyond that, if you went to your CMO or VP of marketing, or if you went to the CEO and said, hey, our ICP is changing, they would think you're insane. But now I feel like the ICP definition, maybe not the core one, but it's like how we define and look for our ICP is evolving like every 6 months. So you may be winning in the market in a certain ICP or an industry a year ago, but now you're seeing that your sales team is kind of struggling to close those. Sales cycles are extending. You're having to include more stakeholders. The buying committee grows. But then all of a sudden, there's this little pocket of industries that are starting to sell, and you're not really seeing it. Like I'll give you an example. So with Time Doctor, for a decade, they sold really well into BPO, so outsourced agencies. And we started seeing a ton of like insurance, financial, and that's where we really leaned into. But then in the last year, we've seen a lot of it kind of shift towards legal and not so much, it's like legal and companies that really need that level of compliance and oversight on their process. But that was never any of our messaging. But we saw that because we seen the activity, people come into our site, sales that were coming in, but we really weren't earmarking them as like priority ICP. So they weren't getting the attention that they need. So it shifts. I think the nuances need to be there about your core use case and the value that they get. And you can track that in the intent signals and the actions that they take. But you have to be comfortable with what's working now, and can we double down on that, and not being stuck in, well, this is our ICP, this is who we sell to, and we've sold to them for 10 years. It's like, well, at the rate that the market changes, you have to be open to the signals that you're being pulled into, and have a system in place that allows you to make those micro pivots and adjustments to capitalize on that traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we used to actually do work directly for private equity firms. We still do a lot of work with them by serving their portfolio companies. But like literally one day we're just like, no more private equity as direct customers. And I remember like we literally like I was on the phone with this one PE firm, and I'm just like, hey, we're not going to work with you anymore. And it wasn't like we canceled mid-contract. It was like at renewal. And I'm like, hey, you know, really appreciate your business, but you know, you're basically paying us, what are they paying us? They're paying us per year about what we're charging now per month. And I was just like, we can't do it anymore. And he was so upset with me. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. And this is a major pivot for us. But, you know, for me personally, it came down to like, are we going to be the best in the world at helping private equity firms source investors and potential deals? And I looked around at the market and I was like, there's 3 other companies that do this way better than us. And I used to work in private equity, so I understand the industry, and that was a small advantage. But I'm just like, you know what? Like these companies are way bigger than us. They're way better than us. Like one of them is literally sitting in the offices of Blackstone. Why am I trying to compete with these guys? Like, I think we've lost this race. Like, let's go somewhere else where, you know, the things that I'm more passionate about and that we can like double down on. And for me, it comes down to like, it's full cycle. It's not just sales. It's also what are we talking about in our marketing content? It's how do we develop our product, or in our case, our service offering? How does that like virtuous or vicious cycle repeat? And I'm looking at this and I'm just like, how can we just pick this narrow niche and just be the best in the world at that? And every single day waking up and going, how can we get better and better and better at this? And if we're spread too thin, we can't do this. And this is where I struggle, because it sounds like a great concept, and it's a little bit easier for me to do this because I'm just like, you know, I've got like the blinders on, and like I put out marketing content and, you know, make sales calls, and we're just like, this is the only thing we're focused on. But when you have a larger organization and you say, this is our ICP, you get these leads that come in, and then it's like, are you going to say no to that business or not? And that becomes a really difficult question to answer. You got this revenue target to hit, and you're saying, this is our ICP, but then this other customer comes out of the woodwork. Do you take their business or not?
And it's a very, made deja vu, because when I had an acquisition back in 21, so I went out, did board sits, fractional stuff for about 3 years, and I remember going through that same phase in the first year. I was like, anyone that wants to give me money, I'm going to help them. And it was like every customer that I think I had like 12 at one time. They were all different, and there was like three of them that was like bread and butter. Didn't even have to think about what needed to get done. And they were my favorite customers. And so I had a coach that was like, why don't you just work more with those ones? Because, and lo and behold, all the other ones, they were just like low cost. It was like discounts like crazy. And so it allowed me to kind of weed out the customer book and then really focus on these ones and then get more customers like that. And then since you're an expert in that field, you can charge more. It has a bigger impact on the business. And I take that learning into this to this day. And it's like, well, it's not so much. And I think people get wrapped up in ICP and personas. It's like at the end of the day, there's a common use case, a common thread between anyone that gets value from your business. And I think ICP and like personas is really good for messaging and marketing copy, marketing content. But when it all drills down to it, they're all, for at least for Time Doctor, they're still searching for a solution with one or two common use cases. And so if you can focus on solving that use case, you no longer care about the ICP definition. It's like if they need this use case solved for, then you have those playbooks defined in the system, then you empower and train your sellers to know how to navigate that instead of being rigid with scripts. Then you can sell to quote unquote anybody, but then you can put the guardrails on after that to where you can get really specific on the use case you're solving for, regardless if it fits your perfect ICP, because they can come in on the perfect ICP definition, but then they only want to use this small part of your product. And then they cost you a lot of money to maintain. And so it's centralizing more around the specific problem and outcome that you're getting a business to, almost ignoring the ICP definition a little bit. And it's like, are they getting value from the specific thing that we help them with? And then how does that apply to a different industry? Because then you're focused on solving a problem and providing a solution that you're really, really, really good at, instead of trying to appease to a couple areas in the market because you sold to them before and they happen to pay you a lot of money 5 years ago and not that much anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at that. And, the way we look at this is, we've got this B2B SaaS company like yours that comes to us and it's like, this is great. And then we have a professional services company that comes to us and they've got 25, 50, 100 salespeople. They've got recurring revenue. They've got to figure out how to like retain and expand their customers. And I'm like, everything we're doing for that B2B SaaS company, we can replicate for the professional services firm. Maybe if they don't have as much recurring revenue, there's a little bit less focus on retention and expansion, but like a lot of the same playbooks apply. With private equity, it's just like night and day different. And in many cases, like when I'm on the receiving end of a sales pitch, and for some reason, like I'm gravitating towards, financial solutions or whatever, if you're trying to pitch me like an accounting system, like it doesn't matter to me that I'm in a particular industry. Maybe there's some nuance there. What matters to me is that I'm a small business owner, and that I actually own the company. And I think that changes everything. And so maybe if NetSuite is trying to pitch me, it's just like, I have no interest in that. Like all I care about is like, is my P&L accurate? And do I know how much cash I'm going to have in the bank, like in 6 months? And, whatever industry I'm in, I don't know how much that necessarily matters. So your point about the use case, I think is really, really important, but we're getting off track here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I had the same experience with the calling tool. We were trying to move away from a provider, and some of the, I'm 6 or 7 different demos with different, calling tools for SaaS companies. I'm like, they're still not hitting the mark. And then I had one tool pop up and I took a demo from them, and they're technically advertised as like a call center software. And I wasn't even on my radar. No one ever reached out to me, and I got referred to him. And then we ended up going to the demo. I'm like, this is exactly what we needed. But we're not a call center.
Yeah.
But we had the same problem, the use case that tool provided. And it's just interesting that companies get so wrapped up in their ICP and persona definition that they kind of forget about the actual problem they're solving.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. I think the reason I focus so much on industry is like when I worked at Salesforce, I covered software, professional services, media, and advertising. And like I said, professional services and software had some similarities, but then you get into media and advertising and they're like, well, we have these insertion orders and we have to track, like we sold this insertion order for $100,000 and we've only served $50,000 of ads and we need $50,000 left. And how do I build Salesforce to track that? And I'm like, I did 3 years of that and I still don't know the answer to that question. And it's just like, every time I went to that meeting, I'm just like, I don't understand your industry. And it's just like, I've only got so much like bandwidth in my head to try to like solve various problems. And then like every once in a while you get the curveball and I get a customer that's like, we do commercial air conditioning installation on like the top of skyscrapers. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a lot of work for very little payoff.
Yeah. No, it's all about the use case and the problem you're solving. Like if you can narrow it down to that, then I don't think customers really care if you know their industry. They want to know if you can solve their problem.
Absolutely. I want to know, like, as a buyer, I want to know that you understand the context of what I'm dealing with. And I'm trying to think of a good example here that's like industry agnostic, but there's so many things in my business that I'm trying to solve for. And I don't care if you know anything about my industry. I care if you know about that particular thing that I'm trying to solve. And what I want to know is like that you've worked with a customer that's faced the same issue, that's like me in a relevant respect. So like for me, a lot of times it's small business owner, like, cool, you did all this wonderful stuff for Pepsi. I don't care. Like, I'm not Pepsi. Like, why are you sending me the Pepsi case study? But anyway, we're way off track. Let's get back on it. One of the things that I wanted to do here, I wanted to paint some context. And this does kind of tie back to the conversation, because for CROs and other revenue leaders that are listening to this and they're hearing all these things, I want them to understand a little bit more about your team. So can you tell me a little about the size and the structure of your team? Like, how many reps do you have? How many are in enterprise? How many are SMB, SDRs, et cetera? Just kind of paint a picture so that like people listening to this kind of know what they're comparing notes to.
Yeah. It's like, if you talk to Kyle Norton about optimizing account executives, you don't realize they've got 100 AEs on their team. You're like, oh, that's a different story, right? Well,
also, and they're a really transactional sale, which is super important to the story that we did in our podcast. And I'm like, like the reason why Discover didn't matter is because it's a transactional sale.
Yeah. ACV mattered a lot. And we have an element of that on our team. We've got an SMB account executive team, right? So I'll do kind of high level. At one point, I was your quintessential CRO. I owned marketing, SDRs, sales, solutions, partners, CS, support. It was all underneath the umbrella in the beginning. And the whole goal was to just get a handle on things, develop the leaders, and then section it off. So now at our company, marketing is no longer under my control or management hierarchy. They have a seat at the table, which is great. I have a dotted line in. And so now with CS and sales, partners, and solutions, that's all underneath the umbrella of revenue. And so on those teams, there's about, I think, somewhere between 60 to 70 people total. And so we've got 4 to 5 SMB account executives. We've got 4 to 5 upmarket and mid-market account executives. And then on the CS side, it kind of matches with a couple more. So we've got our SMB CS team, that's about 5 or 6 people. And then our upmarket CSM team, I think, is at 5 people right now. Then our solutions team has 6 people, I think it is. So it's kind of like handfuls. It's not like huge teams, but when you add it all up, you've got your middle managers in there as well. So you've got your director of SMB, director of upmarket, both on the CS side, and you've got your director of solutions. And so there's a broad team, but it's not outweighing or a massive team on either end. I really try to balance between sales, CS, so that way when they're a sales led or a sales assisted deal, they've got someone on the other end to kind of help them through that journey. And the playbook and the process is different for an SMB customer versus an upmarket customer. So they kind of have their path through the business. So it's not a massive, 50-person sales team or a 20-person SDR team. We really function off of 2 or 3 SDRs, and it's optimized through a director of business development who is kind of like our AI pioneer on our team, who came from the account executive team. So he nerded out and really liked AI and really leaned into it. So he's the guy that helps us optimize Clay, all of the enrichment on that stuff, building the agentic outbound flows that helps circumvent marketing to help build pipeline outside of our paid campaigns. So we're really trying to lean into agentic revenue generation through the different areas. So I don't know if that answers your question. Kind of went on a tangent there, but that kind of gives a little bit of the layout.
No, it's great. I mean, your tangent went into my next question. So now that I understand like the layout, kind of taking us back to our story. So you kind of fix these foundational elements. You fix the issue with the trial registrations, you fix the lead routing, you fix the attribution, you're understanding where these leads are coming from, you've got the data enriched, you're getting responses really quickly. This is having all these downstream effects, improving your ACV, shortening sales cycles. All this stuff makes obvious sense. It's like, well, if you go from taking 10 days to respond to a lead to 2 hours, it stands to reason you're going to like win more deals, bigger deals, win them faster, obviously, because there's literally 10 days that are gone from your sales cycle. So then now that you've got that foundation, tell me a little bit more about how you train the team and how you're using AI to amplify that.
Yeah. And so there are 2 different threads on that one. I would say nothing in AI would have been possible if we didn't kind of fix the foundation. I'll just start there.
Oh, there's a soundbite.
Yeah, it's like you can't do that. Because if you try to apply AI to a broken foundation, you're going to be part of that group that says AI doesn't work. It's like, well, you can pick any tool in the market now with the advancements in the last 6 months. It's going to work for you if your foundational layer is done right. But for me, when I say agentic revenue, it's like all about empowering the human. It's like having a prep agent for the account executive. So that way they get all the information that they need, what signals, what activities, what campaign do they come on, what's their activity? If they're in a trial, what are they doing? So that way the account executive knows what's going on and can strike while the iron is hot, can follow up properly. And then that also leads into training, right? So training and coaching, if you're a sales leader listening to this and you're not spending a minimum 50% of your time coaching and sitting with your reps, you're not doing your job. Like a direct manager's primary focus is to make sales happen through your account executives. If you're having to step in and close deals, you've got the wrong team. Like especially nowadays, that model worked 10 years ago. But as a sales leader, direct line sales leader, you have to be coaching and challenging and pushing your reps to get better. So the way that we've implemented coaching here, like we use models like spin selling, gap, and challengers at the foundation, right? So you got to really instill that into the organization. But the key thing that we've done is instead of just teaching them scripts and methodologies, we apply the framework from our customer's perspective. This is where ICP stuff does come in and where the use case comes in, because you have to take the training and coaching and guidance with the sales team beyond that, because that's where I've seen AI actually take people's jobs is they can't take their skill set and apply it to the customer. They're just surface level. That's where you have AI voice qualification agents and outbound SDR type stuff really take over, because if an account executive can't take it from your basic discovery into how you deliver the value to that prospect in the selling process, your job's at risk. So that's one area we've really focused on for sales and CS coaching, because it's very similar, is you have to be able to apply your expertise from the company that you're at to unpack the real pain that they're experiencing and help deliver a solution. So you've got to really dig in from a discovery perspective, ask challenging, like thought-provoking questions, not just what'd you do before coming to us. It's like the buyers are smart. They know what's happening. They've been to your website. They've talked to other competitors. So if you ask really basic surface level crap, you're going to lose authority in the first 10 to 15 minutes. So when we talk about sales coaching and training and methodologies, how quickly can I get that account executive asking thought-provoking questions and getting that prospect to think differently about their current situation? Because you have to unsell them from the current reality. Well, and go ahead. I was just going to
say this goes back to me about like the ICP and the account focus. In my case, like with what I've sold, I've only sold basically to 2, maybe 3 industries in my whole career. So 25 years of selling to basically 2 or 3 industries. So I just know them like front and back, top to bottom. But more specifically to your point, I know the use cases that are relevant in those particular industries. Like, yeah, I've sold into private equity. That doesn't mean that like I know how private equity does like fund level accounting. I have no idea how that works. So if you threw me into that world, it would be all new for me. And I would hope that if I was doing that, that would be the only thing I'd be focused on, because that's really hard to learn. How does a private equity firm do fund level accounting? If you don't understand that, how are you selling a fund level accounting solution? And I think I struggle with this because I see reps that are covering like 50 different use cases across 50 different industries and 20 different like buyer personas, and you're bouncing from one thing to the next to the next. It's like, how can you do anything other than just say like, the old Sandler submarine, like, well, what have you done to try to solve this so far?
Yeah. And this is where I feel like AI has helped a lot in the sales world, because you can, if you have a solid account executive that understands the mindset of a good seller. And when I say that, it's like the best sellers I've worked with have just been annoyingly curious. They don't just rest on their laurels and get the answers that they want and move on. It's like they don't move on from topics until they get to the root cause. And so you can plant one of those sellers in any situation, any scenario, and they can become effective in the first month just by getting curious around their best customers. And the mention of like the 50 reps or 50 ICPs, different use cases, this is where AI, I feel like, has made the biggest impact, because you can empower that rep who's got that solid fundamental to get those insights and get those questions that can be their co-pilot to really help accelerate that. Because you can be relevant in a new situation very quickly if you've got the foundation for the AI and then combined with that skill set of the account executive. So you can have that truly skilled account executive be powered up by the information they need to have that right level of curiosity, like showstopper questions. Like I've got an agent right now that we're improving to where it's that they have a persona that comes in at a type of company. They came in this campaign and they have this level of intent data on the website and signals. It can generate showstopper questions that get relevant like that. And so instead of asking generic questions, you can ask a question of like, hey, how often do you have, because we sell into BPOs, business outsource companies, really big ones, some of the biggest on the planet. The account executive can come in that room and ask a question similar to, how often do one of your customers complain about the amount of billable hours that show up on their invoice and you don't have an answer for it?
Solid question.
Yeah. Right. and that right there causes them to stop and think. It's like, actually, I don't know. Great. Well, let's dive in.
I love that. It's making me stop and think.
I said that question on purpose now.
Yeah.
But that's where coaching and AI combines, where it's like you can develop the AI and the agent based on that solid data layer and foundation. When you have all that ICP and all those things figured out, and combined with a sales rep who has that fundamental skill, that's when you really start to take off. It's when you have the seller who hasn't developed those skill sets, try to apply it to the agent, like the recipient of the agent's information. They don't know how to use it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So we don't have a lot of time left, but with the time we do have, I want to unpack as much AI stuff as I can. So what else are you guys doing in AI, or what else can you share with the audience about what's working for you or what you think will be working for you with AI?
Here's the thing. And this is where I get the feedback from our CEO. He's like, you're the most unique sales leader I've ever worked with. And so one of the things I'm trying to work on right now is, so when you have an existing customer, they buy from you, they've been with you for a year, and you develop this champion relationship and stakeholder alignment. But oftentimes decisions come from above your champion that end up getting your customer churned. And what I'm trying to develop is like, how do we get the insights of unknown senior stakeholders that are showing indicators that are negative on our account? So it's like combining something like a sixth sense or whatever that pulls up. I'm looking for negative intent signals for stakeholders that are above our champion so we can get ahead of churn and help impact retention. So instead of just looking at intent signals and activity from within the people that we know, which is easy, you can get that natively in HubSpot, right? But it's trying to give visibility on what's the black swan, what's the unknown. How do we identify the stakeholders that are not currently in our buying group for our existing customer? And then can we find negative intent signals that may lead to potential churn? Because, you know, every SaaS company has this scenario where we have a great customer that's been with us for 5 or 6 years. You go on site with them, have that EBR, do the whole thing. They do a case study and they want to do beta stuff with you. And then 2 months later, they're gone. Well, that was a decision that was made above their head that you as a CSM or a company didn't have insights on because you didn't have a relationship with that person. So that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out is like, how do we do that? How do we get visibility on the conversations and actions that are happening above our champions' heads? And then we can help them navigate it and do some champion coaching around it.
And where do you even get data for something like that?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out is like, how do we, because I know it's out there, but it's so much of AI and so much of the optimizations is everything that you already capture. And it's more about like, how do you present and optimize the data and intent stuff that you already have, but how do you get that visibility on the stuff that you really don't have yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's so relevant. I was just on a call this morning, which was with a company that was a customer, and we're trying to pitch, helping them specifically with their new business, outbound motion. And then they're sharing with me like, hey, like the CEO's turning over, the owner of the company is like stepping in. We had massive like retention issues. All this stuff is like coming down. And it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like, and so we can't move forward with anything. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I fully get it. And I'm not having a conversation with that owner of the business. And it's a large business. So it's kind of interesting to think about like the owner of the business, like stepping back in. And it's, I mean, so many of these decisions are made with things happening like that you have no exposure to, but like, where would it's like this private company. I can't get access to their like retention rates, like publicly. So it's an interesting thing to solve for.
Yeah. There's things that are happening out in the market that you can potentially see, but how do you capture that? It's and it's an interesting thing. That's all I got to say. It's going to be challenging to build because we have all the other stuff, right? It's like you have your outbound agent that's, capturing intent signals and building the messaging and crafting it based on, micro agents based on personas. You've got the prep agent for the account executive bringing the information in that helps them with the follow-up and the follow-through. You've got your CS agent that does the same thing for existing accounts. And I'm like, it's still only looking at the information that's already in front of us. Like, how do we get outside of that a little bit and get ahead of any retention issues that we have for our market customers?
Yeah, I mean, where my head's at with that kind of stuff is like, okay, you've got the data in your ecosystem. You've got stuff in your CRM, in your marketing tools, in your email. You also, of course, have company websites, which you can now like take AI and go, dig through those websites and uncover more information. I don't know how it relates to your particular issue where you're saying like there's like stuff happening inside of this closed door room. But where my head's at is if you set the foundational layer right and you say, okay, like we got all our data together, all of our systems are connected. Here's the data set that we have. We've got our marketing intent data. We've got our third party 6 Sense intent data. We've got our firmographic data, our technographic data. We got all the stuff from Clay. We got the stuff from ZoomInfo. We put it all together. Now we like take the AI and go research, the website, or there's an issue with accessing LinkedIn, but if you could get around that, like go access this data on LinkedIn. Anybody that's writing any content, like what is their content saying? How do you put all of this stuff together to answer questions like the one that you're asking? And this to me is really, really interesting, but you can't do any of that if you have like a foundational data layer that's completely broken.
Yeah. Yeah. And the part of that too is for me, I can't hand that off to anyone in my organization to go solve because no one else in our organization is going to know what good looks like. And so I have to go do that stuff. I have to get hands-on and go build the model, build the framework, and start implementing those things myself. Because again, like AI is so new in the market, maybe there's someone on your team that may, nerd out and really enjoy it. But like you as the corporate executive, the CRO or VP of sales, in the next 12 months, like to figure out these hard questions, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and do the work yourself. Like that's what I'm doing, resetting some of the responsibilities on our team. So I've got time on my calendar to where I can go solve that problem. Because it's been a question I've been asking our team for 6 months. It's like, so if you want to solve hard questions in the business, especially today, like you as the senior leader of the business, you've got to roll up your sleeves and go do that work. You can't pass it to your team to go figure it out.
This is the number one thing that I've seen, like with, the non-AI stuff for the last 15 years of selling and implementing Salesforce and HubSpot and all these other tools is, look, like, okay, let's say that you have that right person, the person that understands go-to-market, that understands Salesforce and HubSpot, and they're geeking out on the AI. We happen to have people like that, which is great. But you as the CRO still need to sort of own the outcome. And so even if it's something as simple as implementing Salesforce, like I've seen success or failure being dictated solely on this, because at the end of the day, if you say, here's the outcome I want, we're going to build, in your example, we're going to build this research agent and it's going to pull all this data. Here's the prompt. It's going to run all this stuff. And this is what it's going to spit out. If you're not owning the outcome to say, okay, this is now like producing the output that we want, and then hopefully by extension, producing the revenue that we want or contributing to producing the revenue that we want, then it's just going to fail miserably. And I've just seen this again and again over 15 years. If, however, you've got the right person in place and you can delegate 99% of the work, all you need to do is check in periodically and say, okay, like, where are we at with this? Is this doing what it needs to be doing? What's the next milestone, et cetera? Let me provide feedback as the person that's running the revenue team and understands the nuance and context that you, Mr. Go-to-Market Engineer or Ms. Go-to-Market Engineer, probably don't understand because you haven't run a revenue team before.
Yeah. And the thing I have in my gym at my house on the mirror, I see every morning, it's like, no one's going to care as much as you do.
Yeah.
And so that's like one of my measures on projects and initiatives and stuff that I lean in on and own the outcome. It's like, do I care enough to be okay if this fails? And if the answer is like, no, this has to work, then I'm going to own it.
Well, this is another lens that I always look through because I just had a daughter a little bit over a year ago. And it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing, just like every parent, right? But like, I care about that more than anything, like every parent. And it's like, I don't trust anybody with my kid. And it's not because I think I'm smarter than them. It's just, I care more, and I don't say I don't trust anybody with my kid. Like we have a nanny and she's great, but like, there's still, you're like constantly like, just like I said, you're checking in, making sure everything's going the right way because you care so deeply. And I think like that passion and that care for whatever it is you're doing, whether we're talking about kids or the gym or go to market, if you're just like, we have to make this work in my 15 years of working with CROs and revenue leaders and trying to do things like Salesforce and HubSpot and now AI, Jason Lemkin just posted about this today. If you're just committed to say like, no matter how many iterations we have to go through, we're going to find a way to make this work. It's most likely going to work unless it's just an impossible thing that nobody will ever achieve.
My challenge is I love what I do, and I can find a way to get passionate and care about every aspect of it because I enjoy it. And so my problem is finding the things to care more about that get my attention and ownership on the outcome. Because I've worked in every area of the business on the sales side, right? With the marketing teams, I've done PPC stuff back in the day. I've been a CSM account manager. I've been on the solutions team as a consultant. So I see all these areas. And as a CRO or as a sales leader, you really have to take a step back and like, what is the most important thing that needs your time and attention that you care about? Because if it needs your attention and time, but you don't care about it, your life's going to suck, right? So you have to be able to prioritize your time and pick what is that big domino that you're going to own and you're going to knock down. By the way, if you need any advice on daughters, I have 4 of them. So,
we're just going through sleep training and teething. Like it's exhausting, but it's just like, I know the problems are just going to get bigger and more complex. But right now it's just like, am I getting enough sleep? It's really all it is. It's not super complicated so far.
Yeah, that's good. It's when you complicate that stuff is one of my favorite sayings is fancy fails, simple scales, and it works across everything you do in life. So if it's too complicated, if you got, if you're trying to raise your kid on an alarm clock and schedules and this and that, and whatever, it's like it's going to get too much too quickly, and you're going to forget about caring about the kid. Same thing in business. If you're trying to over operationalize things and engineer stuff, and you forget that the simple way is just download the CSV and upload it in the system. You don't need an API connection. Do that until it hurts, because then you're going to really know what works.
Yeah, it's funny. Like if you have another minute, I'll share one example and then we can wrap. I lost like maybe 25 pounds of fat this year. And I started off with like the whole like crazy Excel sheet macros, measure everything. And it's just so complicated. And what I centered in on, because I've been on this journey for maybe, I guess like last January is when I really, really started like sticking to it. But there was like a lot of trial and error before that. And then what I landed on I was like, I eat the exact same breakfast every day and I have a protein shake every day. So then what that leaves me with is if I want a certain amount of protein and calories, if I just divide that number by 2, then lunch and dinner are the same. So for example, today, my lunch was pork chops and French fries, but they're like baked fries, so they're healthy. And so then I created another sheet that just says, okay, I need 54 grams of protein per meal. So pork chops, 54 grams of protein is 212 grams of pork chops. And I put it right on the fridge. So it's like, okay, cool, pork chops for lunch. I need 212 grams of protein. Here's the calories I have left. Then there's another chart for like the potatoes, and it's like 300 grams of potatoes will fill out my calories. Boom, boom, boom. It's so simple. It's just every meal is like exactly the same thing. Yeah, I'm not eating pork chops for every lunch, but replace the pork chops with steak or hamburgers or whatever. And it's just like, I need this many calories and this much protein. And if I go out to a restaurant, I pull out like ChatGPT and I'm like, how much of this burger can I have? And it tells me, and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna eat 3/4 of this cheeseburger and go home and I'll be good to go.
Yeah. Just simplify it. Like, even with weight loss and gym stuff, we oftentimes people skip over the most important things, which is the foundation of health. Drink enough water and get enough sleep.
Yeah, sleep's really important.
Like you want to get fit, lose weight, feel better, prioritize your sleep. It's one of the things I've done in the last few years, because I used to be the 6-hour power guy. And I was like, no, like get 7.5, 8 hours, prioritize the sleep, and set your life up to where you don't have to be at a call at 6 a.m. every day. Like you got to adjust it, but simplify it, like simple scales. Simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today. This has been awesome. If people want to stalk you on LinkedIn, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Honestly, it's where most of my old stuff used to go, but LinkedIn's probably the easiest. I respond to DMs. I comment on things randomly. I know I used to comment on your stuff all the time. I need to get more active on LinkedIn. I used to be a lot more active, but when you're running a business, sometimes that's what goes to the wayside. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest.
Right there with you. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.